All right, we are live. We are here today with Simon Horton, one of the most celebrated authors and most recognized and decorated authors in negotiation, one of the masters of negotiations. And his books, Negotiation Mastery, and other books about negotiation have been recognized at forums as big as the Financial Times. And he's here with us today to incorporate a very unique forum that we have organized for all of you today. And it's called Negotiation. All you want to learn about negotiation in 1 hour. And that's exactly what it's going to be. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest today, joining us all the way from England, Simon Horton. Simon, thank you so much for taking out the time.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for having me here. And yes, good afternoon, everybody. So yes, indeed, everything you need to know about negotiation in an hour. And interestingly, the first thing I think you need to know is that how most people view negotiation as the old haggle that you kind of do in the marketplace. I'm not going to pay any more than $10 for this. Well, I'm not going to sell it for less than $20 is actually wrong. And that is how most people view negotiation as. But it's wrong. The research clearly shows that the best approach to negotiation is the win-win approach, where both parties can go away sort of happy with their outcome. And this is actually, I appreciate some of you might have a pushback. Well, my counterparty isn't a win-win player themselves, so that won't work with him. Or some of you might say, yes, great in theory, but in my situation, there isn't a win-win to be had. But the research shows that actually, if you go about it the right way, even in those situations, there is a win-win to be had, and that is the best approach. And even for selfish reasons, even if you are the most evil psychopath in the world, and I'm sure you're not, but even if you were to be that, then you would get your best outcome by taking a win-win approach. And in this next hour, we're going to look at a number of things that will help you achieve that. So let's have a look at the agenda. We're going to start off by focusing on getting your win. So I'm talking about win-win, but obviously the most important part of that is your win. So we're going to spend some time just simply isolating your win and focusing on that. And I'm going to give you some tips in terms of how to make sure you get your best outcome. And I'm going to encourage you to be ambitious. I'm going to encourage you to be creative.
Great.
Then we're going to look at stepping into their shoes, and where we've identified our win, but let's take some time to step into their shoes and understand their perspective, because one thing you can guarantee is that they will see that situation very differently to how you see it. So, and typically what we do is we have our perspective and our rationale and our evidence to back that up, and we'll think it's obvious, isn't it? And they'll have a very different perspective. They'll have a different rationale, and they'll have their evidence to back that up. And typically what we do is go back to our rationale louder, and it doesn't work, I'm afraid. So we'll look at their perspective, but it's not just you and the other person. There are always other people involved. If you're a lawyer, then you're going to be representing your client. You'll be negotiating with your counterparty, but you'll be representing your client. But your client will also have their boss breathing down their neck, and there'll be the competitor, and there'll be the regulator, and there might be many people involved. So we'll look at how to manage complex multi-party situations like that. Then we're going to look at power. And power is important in negotiations, but there are a number of myths of power. And we're going to look at the 3 myths of power with respect to negotiation. And then lastly, we're going to look at the idea of trust but verify. Trust but verify. So trust is massively important in negotiation. You will negotiate very differently if you can trust compared to if you can't trust. But we shouldn't be naive. So we do want to trust, but we shouldn't be naive about this. And so we want to bring in the verification procedures too. And it is these verification procedures that enable you to trust. So that's what we're going to look at in this hour. The first thing is that I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
This is an island, Necker Island, now known as Virgin Island. Richard Branson bought it in 1979. When he bought it, it was on the market for £5 million.
Okay.
What would be your offer? If you were looking to buy it, what would be your offer, would you say?
Well, I would first have to understand where I value that island, right?
Yes, absolutely. So you'd kind of do your own calculations for how valuable it is for you and how you might value that island, because you're right, there are different ways of valuing islands. But let's say you did that. Typically, what might you offer?
Okay, maybe I value it at maybe somewhere around £3 million, or maybe. And I would like to start off my negotiation maybe from £2 million.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So you did your research and you valued it at 3 million. And then you're thinking, right, okay, so if it's worth 3 million, I'll start lower and I'll start at 2 million. And then I can always move upwards if I need to. Great. Sure. Very, very good. Very good. Yeah. And I would say that is a very good strategy in normal circumstances. But the reason why I'm mentioning this particular story is Branson did something different. Branson offered 100,000 and he got it for 180,000, which is quite a remarkable outcome. Because what he did, and obviously you don't know the backstory, but what he did is he did his research as you were suggesting. And it turned out this island was owned by somebody called Lord Cobham. Lord Cobham was asset rich, cash poor. So in fact, his father had just died and he just inherited a big estate, lots of properties, but he didn't have any cash, and he had an inheritance tax bill that went with the inheritance. And that inheritance tax bill was £180,000, and he couldn't afford to pay it. So basically, he was in trouble, and he was looking to sell his own big ancestral family home to pay that tax bill. And Branson said, no, don't do that. I'll solve your problem for you. Give me that island. And he found out that Cobham had never even set foot on the island. In fact, he probably didn't, he just inherited it. He probably didn't even know he had it. It was an item on a spreadsheet somewhere. And Branson said, give me that island. I'll solve your problem for you. Here's your 180 grand. You can now pay your tax bill. Then you don't have to sell your ancestral family home. So in actual fact, it was a win-win outcome because Cobham kept his home, had his tax problem solved. Branson got his island. So I think this is a remarkable deal. Why am I telling you about it? Is it to help you buy your Caribbean island? Well, maybe, you never know, but more because I think this is a remarkable deal. And I believe remarkable deals are out there more than we imagine. And so we just need to push our thinking, be ambitious within our thinking. And I'm not saying they're always there like this. And I'm not saying that even if they are there, you will always get them. That's not always the way. But I am saying that push your thinking and you're more likely to get that extraordinary outcome like this. Cool. Okay, good. So getting your win. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a set of questions to ask in your preparation when you're going into a negotiation. And if you ask these questions, they're going to give you your best outcome. And the first question, I think there's 5 questions altogether. The first of them is, what are your interests? And straight away, we come to a key distinction between the old school haggle and successful best practice negotiation, what the best negotiators do. And this is the difference between interests and positions. Positions is the old school haggle. Interests is where instead you ask about bigger picture, above and beyond the position. The position is, I'm not going to pay any more than $10 for this vase. And the other person says, well, I'm not going to sell it for less than $20. That's the positional negotiation, the classic haggle.
Sure.
The interest says, what's the bigger picture? Why do you want the vase at all? So the example we've got here is the orange. So let's say there's an orange, and you want the orange, and I want the orange. We can fight for it. The orange would end up bruised and mushy, which is no good for anybody. Or we could compromise. We could do that haggle, and perhaps we end up in half. You get half the orange, I get half the orange. But perhaps then we both go away saying, I wanted all the orange. In fact, we're both upset. So if instead we ask the question, why do we want the orange? And you say, because you want the juice, because you're thirsty and you want to make a drink. And I say, okay, oh, I'm not thirsty. I don't want the juice. I'm baking a cake. I want the rind to make the zest for my cake. Now, because we've asked that question, why, we can both fully get what we want.
What we want, yeah.
So exactly. So, and if maybe you're thinking, we both want the juice, because we both, well, then we just ask the question, why, again. In fact, strategy, they say, ask the question why 5 times. What are we doing here? Oh, we're doing this. Oh, why are we doing this? Well, it's going to help us achieve this. Oh, why do we want to achieve this? Well, it's going to get us into this market. Oh, why do we want to get into this market? And so on, and so on, and so on. We see that market as a key strategic market for the next decade. And that why 5 times answer is what's most important. The positions, the dollar here or the dollar there, it's not that they're unimportant, they are important, but they are secondary to the interests. And you get deadlock and standoff and fights at the positional level, but you get solutions at the interest level. When you ask the question, why do you want that? You'll get that there is always a win-win to be had. So just some of the distinctions between the two. Positions is competitive, interest is collaborative. Positions is about claiming value, interests create extra value. Positions is about deciding how to distribute a fixed result. Whereas interest says, well, perhaps we can be creative and create more resources. So let's take the pizza. We're dividing up a pizza. The positional approach is, and any bit of that pizza that I get is going to be at your expense. So you're going to fight it. Any bit of the pizza you get is going to be at my expense. So I'm going to fight it. So the positional approach sets it up for a fight. If instead we create more resources, be creative to create more resources, we can find a solution that both parties are happy. So maybe we bring in garlic bread as well or something, and you get a little bit more of the pizza, I get a little bit more of the garlic bread. I'm vegetarian, maybe you're a carnivore, you have all of the meat bits, I have all of the vegetable bits, or something like that. We find a way that both parties can be happy. The more one party gets, the less the other gets. So it's setting it up as a fight. Interests can get gains for both parties. Positions focus on what, interests focused on. So that's a key distinction between old school haggling and best practice successful negotiators do. Then after that, we ask, okay, therefore, what do you want from this deal? And this is where we go to the positions, because we're not saying positions aren't important, they are, but they are secondary to interests. Third question, what are the different variables involved? And these are all of the different tradables, all of the different possible things that could come into negotiation. You want to be as creative as you possibly can and identify as many variables as you can. So typically, 9 times out of 10, negotiations are about one variable and one variable only, and that's money. If the negotiation is about only one variable, you cannot get a win-win, because any penny that you get is at my expense. Any penny I get is at your expense. So there is not a win-win to be had. So what you want to do is identify as many variables as you can, and then you're more likely to find the win-win across the package of variables. So it could be price, it could be scope, it could be quality, it could be delivery terms, payment terms, level of seniority doing the job. It could be that, you have to charge a full rate now, but you're very busy. But if you wait until a couple of months' time, then you know you'll be quieter, so you can give a discount then. These kinds of things, identifying more variables, and then you're more likely to get a win-win across the package of variables. And ideally, what you're looking for is variables that are easy for you to give, of high value to them, in return for variables easy for them to give, of high value to you. And that's where you get the win-win. And if you think about Branson and Cobham, the 180,000 was relatively easy for Branson to give. But it was a very high value to Cobham. The island was relatively easy for Cobham to give, very high value to Richard Branson. So that's why it was such a great deal. Then we have, what's your MPP and your ideal? Your MPP stands for your maximum plausible position. Your maximum plausible position, which is the most you could possibly ask for and retain credibility. And you want to get that figure into the conversation relatively early, because what you're doing there is you are anchoring the conversation around your best figure. Now, there is a problem with this, is that if you do get your maximum plausible position into the conversation early, they might respond with their minimum position, depending on which side of the table you're both on, obviously. And you've now set it up for a positional haggle, which I'm saying we want to avoid. So instead, try to get that maximum plausible position into the conversation in passing, indirectly. Say something like, so if let's say you're giving them they've asked for a piece of work and you're giving them a quote for it. Say, rather than, and let's say your maximum plausible position is £10,000, just let's say, rather than say, oh, £10,000, it sets it up for them. Instead, say something like, okay, I'll give you an accurate quote next time we meet, but to give you an idea, I did something similar earlier on in the year, and that came to £10,000. Now you've got the figure into the conversation and you've anchored them at that figure, but you haven't set it up as the haggle. If they come back and say, oh, I was expecting less than that, you just say, okay, I'll give you I'm not saying that's what it is, I'll give you an accurate costing next time we meet. So you have your MPP, your maximum plausible position, and you have your ideal. And you might think, well, isn't that the same as your maximum plausible position? And I just think it's worth thinking, what would be an amazing outcome? Just ask that question of yourself, what would be an amazing outcome? Because you just might get it. If you don't do that thinking, you won't. But a bit like Branson, he just thought, well, what would be an amazing outcome? And he just thought, is there a way of finding that? And that ambitious approach to negotiation, being creative about it, finding the win-win, because he was only able to do it through a win-win, I think is going to be a successful approach to negotiate. And if you can do that thinking, again, I'm not saying those outcomes are always there, but just ask yourself that question and you just might find it. And if the opportunity is there, you're more likely to take advantage of it. And then the last question for your win is BATNA. What is your BATNA? And a BATNA is an important concept in negotiation. It stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I'm going to type that into the chat box. Your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And it's basically what it is. It's your plan B if this conversation falls through. If they walk away or you decide to walk away, where are you left? That's what your BATNA is. Are you talking to somebody else, or is it just the status quo? And it is an important concept in negotiation, because you should always be willing to walk away. You should always be willing to walk away. If you're not willing to walk away, you have got zero power in that deal, and you have to accept anything that they say if you're not willing to walk away. So this is why you should always be willing to walk away. But then the question becomes, at what point do you walk away? And most people walk away either based on ego or on gut feel, neither of which are good ways to identify when's a good point to walk away. Your BATNA is a very good way of evaluating when to walk away, because it's a real world reference point. So if you're negotiating, and the classic situation is in the haggle in the marketplace, and you've seen a vase and they're asking, I don't know, they're asking $20, but you've seen an almost identical vase in another stall in the marketplace just around the corner, and you've already agreed 15 with them. That's your BATNA. So 1 penny more than your BATNA. If they're asking 1 penny more than your BATNA, go away, go to your BATNA. If they're asking for 1 penny less than your BATNA, stay in this conversation. Your BATNA is a real world reference point of when to walk away. And if that is your guide of when to walk away, what that means is the higher your BATNA, the higher your walkaway point. In other words, the better deal you get overall. So always be working on your BATNA at the same time. You'll always be working on your plan B at the same time. So there's a set of questions to ask about your own outcome. And then what we want to do is we want to basically step into your counterparty's shoes and ask the same set of questions, but from their perspective. So you want to find out what their interests are, and therefore what they want from this deal. What are the different variables involved as they see them? And they're going to see them differently to you. You're going to ask, what's their maximum plausible position? Or if they're on the other side of the table, it's their minimum plausible position. What's their ideal? What would be an amazing result for them? Because maybe help them achieve that. Most old school negotiators don't think about that. They try and get the other side down as low as possible. But I'm saying the opposite. Try and help them get as much as possible, because then they're going to help you get as much as possible. If you're trying to squeeze them down, what are they going to do? They're going to try and squeeze you down. If you're trying to help them get their win, What are they going to do? They're going to try and help you get your win. So try and help them get as good a win as possible, and they'll do the same with you. But then also, what's their BATNA? Again, here we're stepping into their shoes and understanding their perspective. So what's their BATNA? If you know their walkaway point, that gives you a lot of information in kind of how far you can go in the deal. So just a couple of other questions just to top and tail it. One is, what is going on in your world? What's going on in your world? Remember, we're in this is kind of part of our preparation, and we've stepped into our counterparty's shoes and we're answering these questions as them. Because if you know what's going on in the world of your counterparty, that will give you a lot of insight into how to best negotiate with them. So there's a great saying from JP Morgan, the original JP Morgan. He said, customers buy for very good reasons. And then there's the real reason. And that's what you want to find out. You want to find out the real reason. They won't tell you. They'll tell you the very good reasons, but they won't necessarily tell you the real reason, because it might be quite personal. It might be that it helps them look good in front of their boss, or it helps them look good in front of their client. If you can help them look good in front of their boss, or help them look good in front of their client, you've got leverage. It might be that it helps them get the New York posting that they're after, or something like that. If you can help them with this, you've got leverage. And they're not necessarily going to tell you this, but if you can just understand their backstory, what's going on in their world, you just might be able to find where that leverage is going to be. And then at the other end, what's a possible win-win? We've identified our own win earlier on. We've now stepped into their shoes and identified their win. So hopefully the win-win just falls out of that, and often it does. So what's the possible win-win? And then the last question, what helpful advice would you give to you? Remember, what we're doing here is we're stepping into their shoes and answering these questions as them. So kind of, if they were to give you helpful advice, what advice would they give you, kind of thing? It can be a very helpful question to try. Okay, so we've looked at our win, we've looked at their win, but it is never just the two of you. There are always other people involved. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a specific example, a case study that with some lawyers that I was working with, or a lawyer that I was working with, and then we're going to broaden it out to the more general situation. So I was working with a lawyer. She was telling me about the counterparty she was working with, and she said the counterparty wasn't agreeing to her offer, even though they knew it was the best offer that she could make. And this little stick person on the left is the lawyer that I was coaching. The stick person on the right is their counterparty, and they were currently getting a no. And she wanted to change that into a yes, because it was the best offer that she could make. And then she said, well, to be fair to the counterparty, who was a lawyer as well, obviously, they were fair. They were perfectly reasonable. They knew it was the best offer, and they would accept it themselves. It's just that their client was pressuring them not to accept it. The client was saying, no, don't accept it. So what the lawyer I was working with had to do was to persuade the client, because it was the client that was saying no. But the problem was she didn't know what would persuade them. And even if she did, she didn't have access to them. But the good news is that her counterparty did. So what she needed to do is work with the counterparty to persuade the client. The counterparty did know what would persuade the client, and the counterparty had access to them. And as I said, as we've seen, the counterparty did accept that it was the best offer that could be put on the table. So what she needed to do was work with the counterparty to build the case that the counterparty could bring to the client and persuade the client. But then she said, well, to be fair to them, what we're offering isn't the best offer that we've made. It's just that my client is playing tough. And instantly she said, well, actually, my client is reasonable. They would make a better offer. It's just that their boss is being tough and refusing to budge. So again, it was exactly the same situation. She didn't need to persuade the client. She could persuade the client perfectly easily. She needed to persuade the client's boss. But she had the same two problems. She didn't know what would persuade them, and she didn't have access to the boss, even if she could persuade them. So what she needed to do was work with her client to do this, because the client did know what would persuade the boss, and the client had access. So work with the client to build that to persuade the boss. So let's just go back. Here was a situation where she was negotiating with somebody, not getting her out. But the problem wasn't in the room. It was in two places outside of the room where she didn't have access, with the counterparty's client and with her client's boss. But by working with the people that she did have access to, she was able to get the result and turn the no into a yes and get the outcome that was right for everybody. So that was a specific case study. Let's broaden that out to the more general situation, because sometimes it's a lot more complex than that even. And so, sometimes there's you, there's your client, there's their boss, there's their FD, there's their chief exec, there's your boss who's putting pressure on you, there's your team below you, there's your counterparty, their finance director, their chief exec, their head of sales, and so on, the regulators, and so on. So it can be very, very complex. How do we manage this situation? Firstly, know the end goal, clear about the end goal. She wanted to change the no into a yes, fairly straightforward. Secondly, map out the system. I should add another word there. Next time you see my slides, it will say map out the system visually. So do a visual representation, draw it out. As you've seen, I'm not the best artist in the world. I use stick men and arrows, but they work. But if you're better at visualizing things or drawing or whatever, bring more to it and just put onto that map anybody who you think can impact that negotiation. Either somebody who is blocking it, or who is somebody who might be able to make the deal happen. So map it out visually, putting on all the different people on there with arrows between them, say things like, this person listens to this person. This person is influenced by this person. Because those arrows will show you, if you like, the lines of force in that situation. So that if you want to get a change here, you need to influence here, and then that person will influence there. So map the system out visually. And if it's a complex situation, you then go, sometimes it's quite straightforward, like our previous case, who you need to influence and how you need to go about it. Sometimes it's more complex. So then you ask the question, who on that map do you need to get on board? Who's the one key person that if you got them on board, the deal would go through? Maybe it's the chief financial officer who's currently saying, no, I'm going to block that, it costs too much. Or maybe the chief executive, if you could just get them on board, if they said yes, then everything would flow through. Or maybe it's the local council or whatever it might be. But identify that one person, and then you ask the question, what do you need to do to get this person on board? And there are two parts to that. Firstly, what case will persuade them? And to find that out, the first thing we do is we do the exercise we did earlier on. We step into their shoes and we ask those questions from their perspective. because they're going to have a very different perspective to you. So stepping into their shoes will give you a lot of insight into how to persuade them. But that might not be enough because you might not have access to them. So then the second question is, how do you get access? And there will be somebody on that map. If there isn't, put somebody on there that can give you access. So it could be that you've identified that this person is the key person, and you've identified a case that will persuade them, but you don't have access to them. So who on that map will give you access? And maybe you can identify somebody. If I can get them on board, they will give me access. Great. Now what you've got to do is get them on board. So what we do is we go back to question 3. I need to get this person on board. Right, what do I need to do to get them on board? What case will persuade them? How do I get access? If I've got access already, fantastic. But if I haven't, keep working backwards. Who do I need to get on board that could give me access? And you keep working backwards until you get to a point where I say, actually, this person, I do have access. Right, now I can persuade them to come on board. They can give me access to the next person. I can persuade them. They'll give me access to the next person, and so on. So if it's a complex situation like that, a complex deal where you need lots of people to come on board, this is your route through a complex situation like that. Okay, so now we are going to look at power. And there are 3 myths of power. The first myth of power is that it is all about power. And interestingly, a lot of people do think it is all about power. And that's the old school approach. It's the I'm stronger than them. I'm going to make sure I get what I want because I'm stronger than them. That is not, that only works in a fight. And you want to avoid the fight. With most of your negotiations, you want to avoid the fight.
Yeah.
So my view is that if we're talking about power in a negotiation, we've gone wrong. So recently, there were, you probably saw in the news, been following the Brexit negotiations, good old Brexit. And there was a lot of talk about power in that. And it was wrong. It shouldn't, between 2 neighboring countries, if you like, it should not be about power. Now, that said, in the real world, obviously, power is relevant. We can't ignore that. We'd be naive to ignore that. So I say, do boost your power, not to use it, but so that you don't have to use it. Boost your power and come across strong so that you don't have to use it. If you come across strong, they're not going to pick a fight on you. They wouldn't. They'd be stupid to. So the stronger you come across in a collaborative win-win way, the more likely the other person is also going to be collaborative and win-win, because they just realize there's no point in fighting or in doing anything different because they won't win. There's a great saying from the old American president Theodore Roosevelt, which was, talk softly and carry a big stick. Talk softly and carry a big stick. And it is that approach that, if you've got the big stick, they're not going to pick a fight, and then you can just carry on talking softly and everybody's going to be best friends and it's going to go well. So, but then a couple of other myths around it. Firstly, the second myth kind of is related, which is if you've got the power, use it. If you've got the power, why not use it? Force it through simply because you can. If you're the boss, force them to do it because they can. If you've got the power on your side, force them to do it. And that is not a good strategy, even for selfish reasons. Because if you force something through simply because you can, what will happen is that the other person will agree, they'll sign the contract or whatever, but they'll find their way of evening it up. They will cut corners. They will use cheaper material. They will follow the letter of the agreement, not the spirit. They will put their juniors on the job rather than the more experienced people. They will find their way of evening things up. In Britain, a few years ago, there was a huge scandal in supermarkets because the beef burgers didn't have beef in them, they had horse meat in them. And the reason, and it was this huge scandal, and the reason was the supermarkets would put a lot of pressure on their suppliers to make their beef burgers cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so the suppliers said, yeah, whatever, we'll sign. But then instead of putting beef in it, they put horse meat. That was their only way of making it worthwhile for them. So that win-lose approach that the supermarkets took ended up being a lose-lose outcome for everybody, because everybody lost from that. Supermarkets lost, and everybody lost from it. So then the third myth, so don't put through something just because you can, because that win-lose approach will end up being. The third myth is around, in fact, somebody just asked a question around exactly this, which is so very good timing. Thank you for that question, which is, what does the weaker person do if you are weaker? Well, there was a brilliant study, how the weak link within the negotiation is the party trying to make the deal. So it's just give. I presume this is going back to the previous slide, which is in the multi-party situations. Well, if there's the gain for them and the gain for the next party, that's what they do. They find the gain for the next person, and then that's how they build the link to the next person in the chain. They know them and they have access to them. So they say, hey, come on board with this, and it's going to help you in this kind of way. By finding the value for that next person in it. Sorry, so I did misread that question initially. But the third myth is around, if you're the weakest person in a negotiation, what if you don't have any power? And then the myth is, well, of course, you just have to agree to everything they say, don't you? And the answer to that is no, you don't. There are always multiple sources of power in any negotiation, and you've got to find the source of power that suits you. Now, they are going to lead with the source of power that suits them, but you don't have to buy into that. You can respond with the source of power that suits you. Let me give an example. Let's say you're talking to Walmart and you're trying to sell through Walmart, and Walmart, who have got all of these incredible, huge number of stores in America that you can sell through, and they're saying, well, we're Walmart. I know you want to sell through all of our distribution outlets. If you want to do that, you're going to have to agree to everything we say. And if you buy into that, think, well, they are Walmart. Yeah, I have to do that. Then you end up doing everything they say. That might not be good for you. If, though, you think, well, Mr. Walmart or Mrs. Walmart, very nice talking to you, and yes, we've got fantastic distribution outlets, and yes, we'd love to sell through them, but we've got a unique product. You know that, and you know that your customers want to buy our unique product, and nobody out there is selling it apart from us. So let's chat. And now you've evened it up. They've talked about, they led with Walmart, and we're so powerful because we've got all these distribution outlets. And you said, yep, and we're really powerful because we're the only people with this product, and you want to sell our product. So there are always multiple sources of power, and it's your job to be creative, to brainstorm where your best source of power is, whether it's uniqueness of product or financial resources or contact or ability to charm, build relationship. These are all different sources of power. Your problem-solving capabilities, bringing greater value to it. All of these are different. The law will be on your side. All of these are different sources of power, and it's your job to find the source of power that suits you. Again, not to use it, not to force it through on the other person, but to even things up so you can now both sides will be collaborative. So B has asked the question, locating the source of power and their likings should be one of the first steps of pre-negotiation work. Exactly. Studying the target. So really take that time to do the research for the negotiation. It's like anything. The more you prepare for it, the better outcome you're going to get. So I thoroughly encourage a lot of preparation for that negotiation and prepare from their perspective as well as from your own. Let's moving on then, we're coming to kind of our last couple of slides, and this is the idea of trust but verify. Trust but verify. And so this is to say that trust is very important in negotiation. If both sides do trust each other, you will get a much better outcome than if there is no trust. If there is no trust, you will negotiate in a very different way, and there'll be a lot more costs to the negotiation if there is no trust. But if there is trust, it will be much smoother. It will be friction-free, it'll be much better. So you want to get to the point where you can trust, but we can't always trust, unfortunately. So this is why we have the idea trust but verify. And here we've got a picture of Reagan and Gorbachev. And when they first met, their meeting was terrible, but they did build a good relationship, and they did become working collaboratively together. They started to come up with some ideas about how they might be able to negotiate nuclear disarmament between the two countries. But they had a problem because they trusted each other. They built a good relationship and they trusted each other, but they couldn't trust each other's governments and each other's armies and each other's administrations. So they had a catchphrase that they used all the time, which was, in Russian, it was "Dovryai na provriyai." In English, it's trust but verify. That was their catchphrase. Yeah. So do trust, but have the verification procedures in place. And it is those verification procedures that enable you to trust, because the other side knows those verification procedures are there, and they will be found out if they do anything wrong, kind of thing. So do trust, but have the verification procedures in place. And this is what builds trust. So how do we build trust? Because you might think, well, it's okay, you can trust me, but it's the other side I can't trust. Fair enough. So how do we do that? Well, you may have heard of the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma, again, I'll just put that into the chat box. The prisoner's dilemma is a fairly simple game used in game theory. If you haven't come across it, do look it up. And basically, it's a measure of trust. It's a measure of collaboration. And they've used it a lot to find what increases trust. What factors enable you to be able to trust the other person? And lots of things have come out. Lots of them. Don't have time to go into all of them. Very quickly, the highlights, if you like, were firstly, be trusting. There is value. Basically, you have to go first. You have to go first. If you want them to be win-win, you have to go first and be win-win first yourself. If you want them to be collaborative, you have to be collaborative first. If you want them to help you get your best outcome, you have to go first and help them get their best. If you want them to be trustable, you have to be trustable. And you have to, and interestingly, being trusting itself will increase their trustability. Typically, they will respond to that. Now, we're not saying be naive. So we are saying have the, and we'll come on to that. We're not saying be naive, but typically you are better off if you are trusting than if you go into it not trusting. But it's more complex than that, but that's typically. The second thing is be friends. In other, I'm kind of saying, I'm not saying that you have to be best friends with your negotiation counterpart. Build relationship. The more relationship you can build, the better. The more they like you, the more you are likely to be able to trust them. Quite simply, very, very simple. And go back to Reagan and Gorbachev. Their first meeting, as I said, went disastrously. But to Ronald Reagan's eternal credit, halfway through the meeting, he kind of recognized this, and he paused and he said, "This isn't going very well, is it?" He said, "Shall we start again?" And he put his hand, he leant forward and he put his hand out and said, "Hi, my name is Ron. Can I call you Mikhail?" And basically, at that point, the Cold War ended, because it stopped, that whole meeting turned on its head and it became a good meeting. It had been very frosty before that. Now it was no longer president to president, enemy empire to enemy empire, but it was human to human. It was Ron talking to Mikhail, and they became friends. And that, because of that, they were able to work out deals that was able to basically bring an end to the Cold War. So, but we're saying, let's not be naive. Be trusting and be friends, great, but let's not be naive. So do be strong, do build your power base, do project your own personal credibility, your own personal presence, and be willing to walk away. That's an important power source of its own, your willingness to walk away. So to always be willing to walk away. And again, we're saying be strong, as we said, not to use that strength, but to make that person more collaborative. They are more likely to be collaborative if you come across strong. So be trusting, be friends, be strong, and be smart. So this is that idea of trust but verify. So we're saying we're not being naive. We are being trusting. We do want to build a relationship. We do want to be collaborative. We do want to go for a win-win. But we're not going to be naive. Let's put the verification procedures in place. Talk about future opportunities of working together. If you talk about future opportunities of working together, they're not going to try anything on because they know you can kind of get them back the next go, if you like, and talk about the ongoing working relationship, this kind of stuff. And all of these are things that are going to help you be more certain that you can trust. Try and, we're saying we've got verification procedures in place. Perhaps you can structure the deal to incentivize them to be win-win and to punish them, penalties if they break any of the clauses, these kinds of things. Can you get lock-in into the structure of the deal so that you know they're going to be win? And just a really simple example of that is payment on delivery. If you only pay on delivery, now you know they can trust. You can trust them because they want their money, so they're going to deliver. So perhaps you can structure the deal so you can lock trust into it. These kinds of things. And then lastly, the very last thing, and we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions just after this slide. But this this chap here, Professor Robert Axelrod, what he did is he did a brilliant experiment about the prisoner's dilemma, where he got lots and lots of computer programs of all to play, and he loaded them onto a computer, and each program was a strategy for the prisoner's dilemma about should they be trusting, should they be sneaky, should they alternate, should they be sometimes trusting, sometimes sneaky, this kind of stuff. And he got hundreds of these programs, all with different strategies, played them against each other hundreds and hundreds of times to see which was the best strategy. And there was a clear winner. And it turns out this is the best approach for negotiation as well when it comes to trust. And it's called tit for tat plus one. And basically, you start out being win-win. As we said, you have to go first. So go win-win to start off with, collaborative, trusting. And then if they play win-win, you continue doing so. And everybody is better off and everybody's happy. If they play win-lose, then you play win-lose back. If they play a tough game, you play a tough game. But what's important here is that you communicate your intentions. So what you're saying is, look, I want to play win-win. I think we'll both be better off with win-win. And I'm even prepared to go first on that. And that's what I think we'll both be better off if we do that. If you want to play tough, I can play tough. If you want to play hardball, I can play hardball. I recommend we don't do that. I think we'll both be worse. But if you want to do that, I'll do that. And what you're doing is you're giving them two options. And you're making it easy, and you're rewarding them for going win-win, and you're going first. And you're punishing them effectively because you're playing win-lose back if they do a win-lose game. It should be pretty clear to them that the best strategy for them is to play win-win in this context, communicating your intentions. But then lastly, what the plus one bit is allow margin. Because just allow a little bit of margin, because sometimes there is noise in the signal, if you like, and we can't fully, they said there was an extra zero added onto the spreadsheet, and they said, oh, it was a mistake, oh, it was a typo. And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, we don't know. So the first time, allow a little bit of margin, but then communicate intentions, and the next time you play win-lose back. So that, and again, it's that talk softly and carry a big stick. And it's the same approach, basically. So that's everything you need to know about negotiation in an hour. We've still got a few minutes. I'm happy to stay for a few minutes and answer a few more questions if you've got any questions.
Sure. We did have a hand-in question, and that was to discuss the personal bias that we might have or the other party might have before going into any negotiation. For instance, a negotiator that you might have encountered in the past, and what kind of a strategy that you can incorporate to get rid of such a bias, or maybe go into a prospect even slightly isolating and compartmentalizing your bias, and how can you move forward in such a situation?
Yeah, really good question, because I think that's an excellent question, because biases are there. We can't help them. And often they're subconscious, so we don't even know that we're doing them. Often even people with the very best intentions still have these biases, and there are all kinds of biases. So it's a great question. Probably the person who asked the question knows about cognitive bias. Cognitive biases. I'm going to type that into the chat box, which is a whole field of this kind of thing, they're kind of little loopholes in our brain, how we're not quite as logical or as rational as we like to think we are, because of these cognitive biases. So again, that's a pointer down a further direction if you're interested in taking that further. So what I would suggest, if it's your own bias, do that. Try and do a kind of a bias audit, if you like. Just ask that question, in what way might I be biased here? And if you do look it up further in terms of cognitive biases, they list a lot of them. So if you find one of these lists, you might think, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Because it really does impact negotiation. One of the cognitive biases is that in negotiation terms, everybody, when they've done studies and they've got people to fill in questionnaires about negotiations, everybody thinks that they are fairer than the other person, that they are more logical than the other person and more rational, and that their position is more justified than the other person. But both sides think that. So that can't be true. But both sides can't be fairer than the other person, but both sides think that. So here there is clearly a bias going on. So if we ask that question, what biases might I be falling victim to here, if you like, then that can help remove them. Now, then the other thing is, what about if they're biases? And because they might well have biases as well. And a key exercise to do here in your preparation, in fact, it helps for our own biases as well as theirs, is that exercise where we stepped into their shoes. And if we step into their shoes and see it from their perspective, some of those biases might become a little bit obvious. So some of our own biases and some of their biases. So then if it's one of their biases, if you do think you're negotiating with somebody who might be biased against you or might be biased against the situation or conducting some kind of bias, depending on what the bias is, you can either kind of highlight that bias in a diplomatic way. If you think or find a way of getting them, here's a good way. You find neutral, independent data. So do your research. So let's say you want a pay rise, and you think, well, I'm worth a lot more than this. I want a pay rise of 20%. And they say, no, load of rubbish. I don't think you're worth a pay rise at all. And you're thinking, well, no, I insist. I'm different. How do you find what is fair? How do you go beyond the biases? You do the market research and you find out, well, what is a fair salary in this for my type of role, my years of experience in my geography, my job title, etc. And then you do that market research, and then that will be an independent way of pointing out what the fair result is, rather than my bias versus their bias. And a really nice way, if you think they are biased against you personally for whatever reason it might be, a nice way of doing it is sometimes it's called the accusation audit. So, and basically what you do is you draw it out in the open. You say, listen, I know you think, let's say I'm a negotiator. Let's say I'm a junior lawyer and I'm put into this negotiation and I'm negotiating with somebody who's really, really senior or something. And I think, well, they're just going to think I know nothing. They're going to think I'm really inexperienced. So what I'll do is I'll draw that out. I'd say, listen, I know you're looking at me and thinking, who is this young kid? And I know nothing about the law. Well, actually, I am quite experienced. I have done this, and I've worked in this field for many years before this. I do know, or something along those lines. And you do it in a non-contentious basis. You don't do it in an aggressive way, but you just draw it out. I know you're looking at me, and I know you think this. I know you're angry with me because of this. I know this, or whatever, and you just draw it out, and just say, I'd like to go beyond that kind of thing. So sounds great.
Simon, It was an absolute pleasure having you here with us today. Thank you so much for your time. And this was one of the best sessions that we have so far. And I'm sure the response and the comments are speaking for themselves. This is one of the best turnout responses that we have so far. Thank you so much. And this calls for another session very, very soon.
Definitely. Well, as we were talking about earlier on, invite me over. Post-COVID, invite me over.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you here post-COVID, and I'm sure all the audience and everybody who's interacted with us today would love to meet you in person and learn more from your experience.
I'd love to come over. Okay. Well, all it remains is to wish you the best of luck in your negotiations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And take good
All right.
care of yourself.
Thank you. Cheers. See you.